Committee Room 29. Sound.
Session. Okay, so thank you members for making it up in the earlier time of 9 a.m. today and for battling through the traffic. So I'm going to proceed through the agendas. So apologies, Stephen Dunn. There's an apology from Stephen. And declarations, don't think of any other apologies at this stage. I think members are some here late. Declarations of interest to remind members that they are obliged to declare any relevant financial or other interests which might reasonably be thought by others to influence their approach to the matter under consideration. Any members who have interest to declare in relation to today's business should do so now or when the particular matter arises in the meeting. So any member of any interest they wish to declare? Okay, we're welcoming the Minister and the Permanent Secretary today to our Infrastructure Committee meeting. You're very, very welcome. So at page 6 you'll see the Clerk's memo. At pages 10 you'll see the Minister for Infrastructure update in advance of Ministerial briefing 19th of September. At page 12 you'll see the Minister for Infrastructure response regarding community transport funding. And at page 15 you'll see the official report Ministerial briefing 13th of March, and at table 3 of your table papers you'll see a copy from the Shop Mobility to the Minister for Infrastructure regarding funding, and at page 6 of the table papers you'll see a copy of response from the Minister to Infrastructure to Community Transport Association regarding funding for community transport. So I'm reminding members the session has to finish at 10:30, and we will do that. Because the Minister has a subsequent engagement. So I just seek an agreement that the meeting is recorded by Hansard. All agreed, yeah? Okay, so I'm just inviting the Minister to make a brief opening statement, and then I'm going to come to members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your invitation today. Say thank you for the opportunity to update the committee. I want to say a few words about what we have done over this last 7 months and look ahead to some of my priorities over the coming months and years. Infrastructure, as I've said previously, is an economic driver. It is the foundation underpinning the economic, environmental and social well-being of our people and our society. It is the assumption that underpins every public service. Infrastructure delivers for people every day by providing and maintaining the things we all need to go about our daily lives, which make this place work. I came into this post during a particularly challenging period due to over a decade of austerity and underfunding by the British Government, which required some difficult decisions. Significant progress has, however, been made during this period, namely publication of a new road safety strategy to 2030, protecting community transport and providing a 4.2% increase to support staff costs for frontline public transport providers, protecting concessionary fares, publication of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, tackling regional imbalance by ring-fencing funding of 4.7 million for the Coleraine Derry Phase 3 rail improvements, and announcing the A4 Enniskillen bypass, the A29 Cookstown bypass, the Newry Southern Relief Road and upgrades to the A1. Operational opening of the Belfast Grand Central Station and York Street Station, a phased rolling out of 100 environmentally sustainable electric buses and a £64 million investment in our public transport, and progress on the A5 Western Transport Corridor. Filling more potholes and improving the maintenance of our roads and infrastructure with a £9 million road repair fund, and an investment of £8 million in a series of road improvement schemes. Prioritisation of active travel, including a £2.6 million active travel scheme between Ballykelly and Greystone, and 800,000 improvements to Newtonabbey, progress in Belfast cycling network schemes, and proposals to upgrade sections of the Black Path network in Craigavon, and the £25 million Lagan pedestrian and cycle bridge. Progressing the Belfast tidal flood alleviation scheme to help protect at least 1,500 properties. Completion of the review into the autumn 2023 flooding. Progression of updated water flooding and drainage legislation to enable future guidance on sustainable drainage systems. Looking ahead, I am keen that we find new ways to make the best of what we have. Infrastructure, as I've said, is central to our quality of life. It all starts here. For that reason, I've asked officials to focus on 5 key areas. Firstly, climate change. We are living through a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis, and we are a rural society. so sustainable cars and other vehicles must be part of our future. In support of this, the Zero Emissions Vehicles, or ZEV mandate, provides for 80% of new cars and 70% of new vans sold by the zero emissions, to be zero emissions by 2030. We are progressing this legislation through the Assembly. Our approach will provide a clear statement of the intent to tackle emissions and increase sustainable travel in a way that is fair to our rural communities. Active and sustainable travel initiatives will play a key role in decarbonisation, achieving our climate targets and improving people's well-being. If our roads were stretched in a straight line, we could travel to Sydney in Australia more than 2.5 times over. For those that are classified, we know that 340 kilometres of them are in poor condition, 3% of the road network. Repairing it all would be a massive challenge, but at least it is a finite number. My officials are increasingly focusing on the quality of road improvement rather than just the quantity. This means not driving past 5 small potholes that are still in development to repair one big pothole that has become deep enough to justify repair on a given scoring system. This approach will be incorporated into a new road maintenance strategy, which I intend to publish in the new year. Moving to blue and green solutions for water, we need to stop cutting nature out of our water management systems. Doing so will improve the quality of our rivers, improve the efficiency of sewage systems, reduce electricity costs for pumping and treating wastewater, reduce spillages of sewages into waterways, and reduce risks of flooding. More rain running off developed lands is leading to rainwater in our sewage systems. So blue-green solutions can store rainwater safely, letting it dissipate slowly as nature intends. For these reasons, I have asked officials to begin working up a plan to introduce nature into the system. This will not solve all of our problems in terms of the historical underfunding of water infrastructure. We continue to provide record levels of capital, but more is needed, and I will work with my executive colleagues to secure more funding. I'm also keen to engage developers and encourage developers to contribute to improving our sewage systems. This can include developer-led contributions and sustainable urban drainage schemes. Turning to planning, we have an improvement programme in place which seeks to respond to the raft of reports and recommendations, but it's time to move forward into another phase. I continue to believe that the two-tier planning system is the right solution. Planning decisions need to be made under democratic scrutiny, but we need resources for appropriately qualified people in local and central government to meet all of our demands. And inclusive travel is hugely important to our society. People need to be able to travel to achieve a quality of life. 1 in 4 has limiting long-term health problems or disability. Almost a quarter of all those who live in a household and whose day-to-day activities are limited do not have a car. On average, people with a mobility difficulty make 44% less journeys. We need to find ways to make transport more inclusive, particularly for people with a disability. Well, we will in particular want to play a full role in improving the quality of experience for women and girls, young people and ethnic minorities, ensuring that they feel safe using our public transport system. In conclusion, before handing over to questions, I want to pay respect and thanks to teams in my department, its arm's length bodies and partners, dedicated people keeping the roads, buses and trains moving safely, keeping our drinking water clean and treating our wastewater, keeping and developing a built environment in which we can live and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time and coming to the committee today. So if you're content, I'll just move straight into questions. Obviously this morning we've seen the news in relation to developer contributions for NI Water. I noted that CEF were on the media this morning saying that this will be good for bigger developments, but the smaller developments it won't cover. So I'm just wondering, in that event, what other options are you looking at, and do you think that that will be a silver bullet to solving the issues? And also in relation to the legislation, will that be tagged on to the sustainable drainage bill that we are going to be looking at through the committee? Well,
firstly, in terms of the legislative process, I haven't come to a definitive position on that because we're still exploring whether we require primary legislation or perhaps through regulation. So I'll obviously keep the committee fully informed of whatever pathway we use for that. It's not the silver bullet. It is part of a suite of policies I plan to bring forward, policies and initiatives I plan to bring forward to tackle the underinvestment in our water infrastructure and ensure that we have a sustainable model moving forward. So I have been mentioning for a period of time now that I plan to explore developer contributions. I note the comments this morning from the Construction Employers Federation, and that is one of the issues I will be examining, where it is, on the face of it, possible for the larger developers to make contributions, and then there's a danger that you leave the smaller medium enterprises out of that. So that's something I'm conscious of, and we will look at as we move through the process to ensure that it's a fair and equitable process moving forward. I mentioned in my opening comments that we need to work with nature as well. The SUDS policy, which you've referred to, is an important step forward. It's not the silver bullet on its own either, but it is important that we use different methods to separate rainwater and stormwater from our sewage systems and wastewater treatment systems, and allow that water to enter the system on a slower basis, meaning that the system doesn't become overrun, overpowered. And I'm also working with my executive colleagues to secure additional funding for NI Water. And I've said this publicly before, and I don't think I'm breaching confidence. There is support around the executive table for increased investment in NI Water, because my executive colleagues understand that without investment in infrastructure, their projects can't move ahead either.
Thank you. Moving on, you mentioned there a number of projects, some of which are under city growth deals funding, the A4 bypass, Lagan Bridge. Can you detail what is happening now with projects that are in Mid-South West growth deal and Causeway Coast and Glens that may fall under the infrastructure side of things?
I'm moving ahead with my planning on those. Obviously, we have to await the outcome of the British government's review of funding. But any project that's under my remit at this moment, I'm continuing to move forward on the basis that it will proceed. So when the decision is made, I hope it's the right decision, and you and others joined with the Finance Minister and Executive and the local councils on Monday or Tuesday on the steps of Stormont here in a very unified approach and support of those deals moving forward. So I hope the right decision is made and that funding is kept in place, but I'm preparing on the basis that it is, and that when that announcement's made, if it is positive, I can continue with my planning.
So you're committed to funding regardless if it's paused or not, and those projects will go ahead?
I can't commit to funding regardless of whether the funding is confirmed or not, but I am committed to proceeding with my elements of those deals until confirmation is made. I hope that confirmation is positive.
Okay, and then before I move to other members, A5, we were aware that there could have been an announcement on the A5 in your decision, formal decision mid-September. Where is that currently at, and what's the timescale now for likely announcement on it?
I have submitted the final papers to the executive. I have to say it is probably one of the most comprehensive documents submitted to the executive in recent times. I'm hoping to get that on to the executive meeting as soon as possible for decision, and that decision for the executive is to allow me to make the formal decision to approve the scheme. So I have completed my journey in a sense of all the paperwork, all the recommendations, the studies of the various environmental aspects of it, the legal requirements, etc., are all complete and submitted to the executive, and the executive now has to make a decision as to whether they're prepared to allow me to make the formal decision to move ahead. Okay,
I'm going to move to the Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Minister, Permanent Secretary, thanks for coming today. Can I start by thanking your officials, Minister, just for all the correspondence they've got back to me on a number of issues, and also echoing the great work of your staff across the department on the many issues that I and others contacted on. It does not go unrecognised, so appreciate that. I think we all recognise just how good Grand Central Station is. It's incredibly impressive. I'm just keen, Minister, to tie in, are you aware of any safety or logistical issues preventing rail services starting on time, and if so, when will those be overcome, and when do we expect to see rail travel starting from Grand Central Station?
Okay, can I firstly thank you for your comments about the staff who work in DFI at all levels and all branches of it, because and you have recognised it has to be recognised that Staff and the teams who are working in departments, particularly during austere times, have a very, very difficult task.
Absolutely.
And they're all local people who want to do their best and improve the lives and the lots of those people we all serve. So I think that it's appreciated that you recognise their work. In terms of Grand Central stations, there is a safety process to go through in terms, and it's a normal regulatory safety procedure that has to go through before any new rail infrastructure is opened. And that's what's currently happening with Grand Central Station. So there is nothing that has been presented to me that has caused me alarm or concern that it's out of kilter with what should be normal process in these matters. But I do expect, and is the case, my officials are carrying out a very diligent inspection of paperwork that is presented to them by Translink. It is then, as I understand, the role of my department to forward that paperwork on to the Regulatory Safety Authority, and that work is ongoing.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Moving on to community transport then, I think we all welcome the 4.2% additional investment. What does that look like in real terms, and how has that been filtered down to those who require that money?
I think it's just an increase to the grants that are there, is my understanding. But we can get you more detail.
We can get the exact figure, maybe in my pack here somewhere. But it was in recognition of the cost pressures that community transport face, particularly in relation to salary and pay increases. And many of the staff who work for them would be on a national wage, etc. So there is a legal obligation, indeed a moral obligation, on their employers to increase those staffs and those rates. I made an increase to their funding to help them, to assist them to do that. But we'll get the exact sum forward to you.
All those who will be affected positively who have been made aware, is that correct?
Yes,
Minister?
yes, okay.
The final one then, Chair, is just on MOT centres. I'm just wanting to know the impact, hopefully positive, of the exemption certificates that have been put in place, and when do we expect to see Hyde Bank Test Centre open?
Hyde Bank has been a cause of great frustration to me and indeed to my team in terms of trying to get that centre open. There is still some commercial sensitivities around that matter, and my officials will brief you on that in the near future. There has been considerable due diligence shown by DVA and indeed my team as well in relation to Hyde Bank and getting it operational and the reasons why it isn't operational. So that's ongoing. As you say, there's some commercial sensitivity which my officials will brief you with, and I would suggest would need to be in closed session, but that's obviously a decision of the committee. In terms of the exemption certificates, we expect to see the full result of that in early spring of next year in terms of that filtering through. If I can measure it in one way, my mailbox in terms of correspondence about MOTs is greatly reduced, and I might be tempting fate in that matter. So it is, but it is greatly reduced in terms of MOTs. So I think that that intervention has been positive, as has been the work of DVA staff in supporting members of the public who may be coming up to the period where they need their tax, etc., and getting slots in short notice, etc. So thus far, I'm content that the intervention has been positive.
I mean, is it worth adding, Minister, just there's 115,000 cars that may be eligible for the exemption certificate, so that would be quite a significant change as well, just to add to that.
That's good to know. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
And I thank you, Minister, for the lighter inbox in terms of MOT testing as well, so I appreciate that. Keith?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming along, Minister, and Dennis, thank you. And just echo John's comments regarding your staff. If we didn't have them to work with us, we would get very little done. You know, you need quality staff in every department, and they're, you know, we need those people. I want to talk water quality. I know we've touched on that in the chamber, and obviously the water coming out of Loughney, etc. I'm just looking at two water line updates. One was, I think, back 10th, 11th September. To be fair, not everybody indicating about that the water treatment works, or that abstract water from Loughney are designed for the removal of algae. So I presume that's not a new thing. They weren't just designed yesterday for removal of algae. And then I'm looking at the 19th of September, which is to be fair, is an update saying flushing exercise in our network. So that's an update of what you have done. What was the reasoning for that flushing of the network and parts of the network? What's the thought behind that if there was no issue?
I suspect, and I'll get you the technical reasons for it, Keith, but I suspect it is due to the fact that it is under intense pressure at the volume of algae that's coming through the system. The system has been designed to deal with algae, but when you look at the blooms that are on Loughney in particular, the quantity of those coming through, I suspect, is a challenge, but a challenge that is being met. And the flushing out of the system, I suspect, is as a result of the quantity of material that's coming through. But we will get you a full technical response to that.
Just on that theme, if I may, it's still question one. With respect to with respect to going forward, we know the algae blooms is not going to go away tomorrow or next year, the following year. Do you see any investment required in additional water treatment, but more broadly? Yes, we want algae blooms to remove, we want that all to be, but that's not going to be 1 or 2 years, that's going to be a long-term thing. But considering we're hitting this year and year, do you see any investment required in water treatment, as in clean water treatment, I'll call it?
I haven't had any request at this stage from NI Water for additional water treatment in those circumstances. Obviously, there is a portfolio of investment that's required across the system, right? But not at this stage. The systems that are currently in place are capable of designing, or are capable of dealing with the pressure they are under. Obviously, NI Water are the experts in this regard, and we're in close liaison with them. If there is evidence found that there is further investment required, they will make us aware of that, but I'm not aware of any at this stage.
Okay. And second question then.
Well,
Chair.
I counted 2 questions. My counting's not good, but I counted 2 questions there. So this is your final question for now.
I just want to talk briefly about planning, and I get lots of communication about planning, whether it be a small house in the Mid-Ulster or a larger thing. There's still issues with that process. You've consultees, the delay that, and I appreciate some of that, to be fair, is not directly responsible from yourself. But what are you doing? What can you do more with respect to address the planning issue? Because, well, be wind turbines, green energy, there's a process, but it's long, it's drawn out.
Yeah. Well, many of the planning issues, I suspect you get communication about, or other members get communication about, are council based. So I would first and foremost encourage people to engage with their local councils around how they're running their planning system and how they're resourcing their planning system and what processes and procedures are in place in their planning system. In terms of a governance role from DFI, we also have to respect that councils are autonomous, sovereign, democratic institutions. But we work with them. And we work with them because they cooperate with us. A council could, in some circumstances, tell me to go and sling my hook, because it's none of my business, but they don't. They work with us because they are keen to improve their planning system. So my officials will be engaging with planning officials and planners, i.e. the councillors, over the next coming months and period of time on how best practice is being deployed and developed in a number of councils across the region. Because when you look at the statistics, some councils are dealing quite well with volumes of planning applications coming through, both in terms of local and major, while other councils are facing other challenges. And some of those are unique to those councils, and particular agendas may be at play in various councils. So that's maybe a reason behind those. I have made, in terms of my role, in terms of supporting statutory consultees under my remit, I have made a bid to the Transformation Fund, which has thus far passed a number of phases and is now going through to the next round of deliberations by the board, which I hope is successful, because if that is successful, it means I'd be able to properly resource a number of statutory consultees to ensure that their responses are going back in time to the planners. And I've also made a bid to employ independent examiners to alleviate the work of the Planning Appeals Commission. So I'll be able to use those independent examiners to alleviate some of that pressure and take away some of the scheme, or use those to develop and deliberate on the schemes that are delayed in the system.
Okay.
Can't ask any more, apparently.
I'll come back to you if we have time. Cahill?
Thanks, Chair, and I do apologise, Minister. The motorway from Katy to Belfast is it's not complete just yet. But just on a few notes, obviously, and I do apologise. Like I say, you may have touched on some of my 3 key points. I want to talk about road safety, rural access in terms of TransLink, and also the June 6th monitoring. Just firstly on road safety, and you know yourself, Minister, any death on roads is, it's that not only a serious impact on families, but serious impact on communities. And I'm just wondering where we're at now, and maybe you did touch on where we're at with the strategy and everything else. Just your commentary around this as how we can achieve maybe less fatalities on the road.
Okay.
And, yeah.
In terms of less fatalities on the road, the key message is that every one of us has personal responsibility when we're using the roads. The actions a road user takes decides whether they arrive home safely or the person or the people they're sharing the roads with arrive home safely. That's the bottom line. So we have recently launched a road safety strategy. And that road safety strategy is based on 3 international best practice principles: safe people, safe vehicles, safe roads. So the safe people is the point I've made about each person taking responsibility for their actions on the road. Safe roads is in terms of ensuring that roads are properly engineered to allow vehicles and pedestrians and other road users to use those roads in a safe manner. But I will point out at this juncture, 95% of all road traffic collisions are as a result of road user error. The third element of it is safe vehicles, ensuring that we have safe vehicles on the road. And we've talked about MOTs, but also in terms of further developments around road safety features within vehicles moving forward. So those are the 3 key elements moving forward. That road safety strategy was developed in conjunction with the Blue Light Services, the police, the fire and rescue service, and the ambulance service. And there's a commitment among us all, and it has been endorsed by the executive as well, it has to be said. There's for us all to move forward and use that road safety strategy to reduce road deaths to 0. Now that's could be said as an ambitious plan, but I think what other plan can we have? 1 death on the road is far too many. So we have to and reduce serious injuries on the roads as well. So that's our plan moving forward.
And just on the 6 million resource, I mean, you made a touch on it earlier, just what that's going to be used for. Can you expand a wee bit on that?
So I said to me again.
6 million resource in the June monitoring.
Okay, so some of that resource has been used in terms of internal pressures within my department. In regards to a number of areas, which just have the detail, maybe Dennis has the detail for it. But we had pressures in relation to public liability. We had pressures in relation to road drainage, and there was another measure as well. PFIs.
Yeah, the PFIs, which are so we've a number of schemes for the major roads which are maintained through because they were PPP contracts, public-private partnerships. That maintenance continues to be funded through the unitary payment to those schemes.
And there's still a sum of money to be allocated through that. I'm conscious of winter pressures as well, so there is a small sum of money that still has to be allocated.
Okay, and my final point, Minister, and thanks for coming in today. The issue, obviously, we have a new Grand Central Station, and you know it's up and running now, but it's always been an issue for us to try and encourage people out of the cars and on public transport. But we've had this urban-rural divide, and it's very hard to connect the rural areas. So, just your views on that, and where do you think we'll go over the rest of this mandate, and try and encourage people and encourage more routes or be more viable?
Yeah. Well, just before you did come in, we touched on community transport and the increased investment on community transport, which I announced recently to assist them with some of the pressures they face, though they still can face a number of pressures. I should have mentioned that I am doing a review, or there's a review into community transport on how we move forward with the most effective and efficient way to deliver services to the service users. But public transport does require more investment, and I am of the view that we have a public transport system. We don't have a rural transport system and then an urban transport system, but we do have a discrepancy in the provision of services, certainly to rural communities. So I am engaging, or keen to engage, with Translink around how we ensure that rural communities have access to rural transport, because there's no point me and others talking about the need to reduce carbon emissions from vehicles, etc. I'm encouraging people to use public transport if you have no access to public transport.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming here this morning. And again, certainly echo the sentiments of passing on thanks to the DFI staff, especially on the local ground. I'm sure some of them are cursing the day they ever give me my number, or because I torment them. But I suppose really just you know, You've touched on the economic driver there, with which the Department of Infrastructure plays. But for that, planning for renewables, it needs changed, if that makes sense, and needs addressed. Because obviously in that regard, that will help. As the economic driver, as you say. What is there plans to give any sort of investment in network infrastructure? Is there plans to give that sort of strategic importance in order to develop renewable connectivity and such like?
Investment in the network would be a matter for Department for the Economy. In terms of planning, we did have, and you contributed to the debate on Monday or last week, it was in relation to the renewables. The planning system is positioned to deal with renewable applications, and it goes back to this core question of planning. What is the purpose of the planning service? To me, the purpose of the planning service is to ensure that we have a sustainable development and environment moving forward. So yes, green energy is good. The development of green energy is good, and we have to support the development of green energy moving forward. But in certain circumstances, green energy involves significant infrastructure. And that significant infrastructure is placed in communities, often rural communities, which have a right to express views in relation to that infrastructure, and have also others, and indeed, as part of the planning process, the developer or the applicant has to prove that their infrastructure is not going to have a harmful impact on that environment. That all takes time, and quite rightly it has to be carefully scrutinised before a decision is made. Now, I do accept, and as I mentioned to Keith, our planning service, and I use this in the broadest terms, in terms of both my own department as a planner, the 11 other planning authorities in terms of councils, the statutory consultees from whatever branch of government they come from, are understaffed and under-resourced. So I have already made bids to properly resource and staff those, and I've made bids to have independent examiners and made available for those planning applications where they're necessary. So all that has to be dealt with in the meantime, but the core principle of planning has to be adhered to. It has to be sustainable development. It just simply has to be, regardless of what type of development is being brought forward. Because when it goes wrong, it goes terribly wrong. And we have to avoid that.
Thank you, Minister. We've talked a bit about water infrastructure, and there's notable capacity problems within that. And I suppose really what I'm asking is, what is the Minister doing in relation to water pollution limits that are set by NI Water, but are having a detrimental effect upon the environment?
Well, the utility regulator quite rightly places a very strong emphasis on the environment when developing the spending profile and the work programme of NI Water. So the reason we put wastewater treatment works in place is to protect the environment, protect public health. In a significant number of locations, as you pointed out, those wastewater treatment works are under significant pressure, and in other places we need to put in new infrastructure altogether to protect the environment. So there is a strong emphasis on the environment when NI Water is carrying out its duties, and I, as Minister of the Department of Infrastructure, are carrying out my duties. As I said earlier, it is now accepted, and it was a very easy debate to have, because in fairness, my executive colleagues were coming forward with the view that NI Water needed additional funding. So there's a united voice around the executive table in that regard, and we're working towards hopefully securing additional funds for NI Water. It won't be sufficient, but no department has sufficient funds at this stage, so we are working towards that. And as I said earlier, we're going to work with nature rather than against nature in dealing with stormwater and to allow to take the pressure off wastewater treatment works. And I'm also going to be examining legislative change, if required, to allow developers to invest in wastewater treatment works. So there is a plan afoot, but there is none of these are quick solutions. We are dealing with a wastewater infrastructure that has been underinvested in years. But we also now have record investment going into our wastewater treatment works, but unfortunately we're playing catch up. But there is a plan in place.
Okay, Andrew, is that you? Or
Well,
one last question?
3 questions?
You've one, yeah, you've one last question.
If you're Keith, it's 3.
3 v 2.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And Minister, just Minister, you'll be aware we're approaching an anniversary of the flooding in Downpatrick in the southeast. While the report on the flooding in the southeast was generally welcomed, there has been sort of scant development of interim measures, which is leaving a lot of the people that were affected by the flooding last time round, extremely nervous as we come into the autumn and possibly prolonged rain again. So, is there any update really on interim measures, or what sort of relief or what sort of information can be given to the people of Downpatrick and the rest of the southeast? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The floods last October were devastating. As you've pointed out, and across, and indeed in my own constituency in Portadown, I witnessed them firsthand, the devastation they caused. They were caused by record amount of rainfall, and we've seen more incidents where there's been significant rainfall in a very, very short period of time, which overpowers the systems, and the water simply can't get away in time. And we've seen the recent events in England, which have been devastating there, and through Central Europe, where there has been absolutely devastating floods in recent times. So in terms of your specific question, the review was carried out to examine firstly the response of the emergency services, and that included government departments such as DFI, in terms of how you respond to a flooding incident, how you bring immediate aid and support to affected homes and businesses, which is very, very difficult when there's a deluge of water coming at you. It was also to see what lessons could be learned from that. It also examined where and how the flooding occurred. And that information is then used to see what infrastructure or measures need to be taken to prevent that happening in the future. So the third step is the longest step in a sense, because one, you have to develop the plans, and it's not simply a case of building a wall in point A. You have to decide, if you build a wall in point A, what impact does that have perhaps maybe 3 or 4 miles down the stream. So it is a detailed process, and you can't complete that work in the context of a review. It does take time to do that. You have to understand, as I say, the reason for the flooding. Was it river, coastal? Was it surface flooding? Was it a combination of all? And I suspect in October it was probably a combination of all those things, and how you deal with those. There's some incidences where we may have to look at putting in place new reservoirs to hold the amount of water that's coming into the system. That will take a significant amount of preparatory work, it will take a significant investment, and it will take the cooperation of landowners, where you're going to go to those landowners and say, we need your land for a reservoir. So all those things unfortunately take time. There's no quick fix solution. But one of the things that I do welcome from the review, and has been ongoing with my officials through Rivers Agency, local businesses in the community, is resilience groups, contingency resilience groups, where the local community is equipped with sandbags, which are stored locally, and are supported by my team in the deployment of those sandbags. When those groups work well, they can be a very effective immediate response to a flood. So that work is ongoing locally.
Just maybe, Minister, I could add, there's only, just to say on an official level, there's feasibility work ongoing as part of this. So it's some of this may not be visible yet, but there's work ongoing to do the hydraulic modelling and to look to see what additional structures are needed around some key sites, for example, Downpatrick.
Thank you. We will have officials up to the committee on the 23rd of October in relation to it as well. Peter?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Dennis. It's good to see you again. My first question would be on city deals, and I suppose specifically BRT2. So how confident are you, given the sort of rigmarole that there's been with the UK government recently about city deals, how confident are you that we're going to be able to deliver the infrastructure projects that were contained within that? And again, specifically on BRT2, I think we had officials here a number of weeks or months ago, and I think everyone left that meeting thinking that it was a pretty aspirational project from the outset. So how confident are you that we might be able to deliver BRT2 in the next number of years?
I think, unfortunately, when Labour was elected, there was hope that things would change. And they have managed over this last number of months to suck hope out of everyone in terms of things will change. Now, I work on the basis that it's best to be prepared and have plans in place for when funding does become available, rather than standing with your hands empty when funding does become available. So we are preparing in terms of BRT to move ahead with that project on the basis that we will achieve the funding required to complete it in its totality, which is around an additional, I think around 100 million we need to complete the entire programme in its totality. We are going to engage with the councils, with the council in this case, the Belfast City Council in terms of BRT2. We are going to engage collectively as an executive with the British government around how we move forward with not only those stalled new deals and city deals, but also those city deals that have been announced, and how we bring them to their full fruition. So it is challenging, but we have to aspire to be better, and I plan to aspire to be better and be ready at a moment's notice to have plans in place to spend money when it becomes available.
Just back on the back end, Minister, maybe we're saying Minister's been encouraging us to prioritise within the schemes as well, to see what can be done to get a credible in BRT and in other schemes, to see what we can do in advance. And again, a lot of the work is about doing it up front. So we're just moving ahead with the design work and all of those sorts of elements of it as far as we can under the Minister's instructions.
I may be able to release some funding to BRT2 to put some of the infrastructure in place. And start some of the actual physical work on the ground. I am working with my officials in that regard to see how we move that forward.
This question one still, yeah? Question one? Within that?
Four there?
To do it, Keith.
First question before parts.
I've learned well from Keith. So
It's three.
confident that initial sort of timeline that was in place, pending the funding coming through for the city deal, confident that we're still going to be able to reach that.
No, I'm not confident. We can't be in the current financial circumstances when government is telling you they're going to cut 20 billion. You can't be confident about anything. But I'm confident we are doing everything we can.
Try for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
Okay. Has there been any discussions around improving the output of the EV infrastructure task force? And this was a conversation that came up last week in committee. Charge point operators have been coming to me saying that they're happy enough with the DFI angle in terms of actually getting the thing in the ground and ready to go. But the challenge that they experience is Northern Ireland Electricity. So can you tell me a little bit about the relationship between DFI and Northern Ireland Electricity? Because it sounds like DFI is doing anything and everything that they can, but it's actually getting access to the grid is the main barrier for operators.
The EV charging stations is now largely a private commercial enterprise being driven forward by that sector. I don't have any direct engagement with NIE in regards charging point specific. I have had a presentation from NIE in terms of their future investment plans and how they hope to make significant investment in this region to improve access from all industry and domestic properties to an ever-growing demand for electricity, which will continue to grow as a result of our move away from fossil fuel. So that has been my engagement with NIE in this regard. It has been specifically on EV charging points.
I mean, it's probably worth adding to that, Minister, just to say that building on that, to say that there has been a huge growth in both the number of EVs and the number of charging points. I mean, it's like 60% growth in the last year. So I mean, it's really, really encouraging to see that. And I suppose back to the Minister's opening comments, if we're going to tackle climate change, it's going to be about cars. We can do a lot around other elements, active travel and so on, but that'll be what will remove most of the emissions.
Thank you. And last question, Chair.
Can I stick you down on my list to come back to? It is 3 questions, so I want to be fair to everybody. Danny?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And you'll be glad to know
Question one,
I only ever ask one question, and I'm going to stick to the form. John, it's actually a question for, I suppose, the Gaels of Ireland, and particularly my own children as well. The Grand Central Station, a major class investment, but I have to say, severely disappointed in their lack of ambition to recognise the Irish language, and all my children ask for is equality. So I suppose my question is there anything from your end that can be done, because I don't think it's good enough?
Well, just to put on record, my own children are Gael goers as well, and there is an absolute need for the Irish language to be visible in a city such as Belfast, which has such a significant population that speak the Irish language, live through the Irish language, and engage in the Irish language. So it's absolutely crucial that it is visible and used. I'm meeting Translink later on today, and one of the topics I will be discussing with them is Grand Central Station and the use or the display of the Irish language within that station. As I've said previously, I'm confident it can be resolved, and I'm working to have it resolved. So I've heard and listened carefully to Irish language activists, and who are quite rightly are annoyed at this and frustrated at it, but I'm confident it can be resolved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Danny. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the Minister and Dennis for being here. Apologies, I was a wee bit late. I was already cutting it fine, and then I almost became convinced that you were using your influence to control the traffic lights. As soon as
No, Mark, he definitely wasn't.
as soon as I
Definitely
got
not meant to
to
happen.
Belfast.
What apps I have on my mobile phone are confidential.
But again, I suppose record my appreciation, or our appreciation, of the efforts of staff at an extremely challenging time. It's that the times just get more and more challenging, and I would say that it's not just Labour or the UK government that were elected with the promise of great change either. I know the Chair and a couple of other members have touched on the Northern Ireland water issue. You were on the media today about it, Minister, with suggested proposals around how we can tackle in part this issue, and allowing developer contributions is one part of that. I was just wondering how you would envisage that working. Do you know, if we're talking about the case study that was given on radio today was in my own constituency. There's a pumping station that needs £15 million investment. Like, this is hindering development of a site that's been in planning for all of my political life, which is 20 years now. What level of contribution would a developer be expected to make? Because you don't want to get into a situation as we see with roads, again in my own constituency at Core Roundabout, where a developer does make a percentage of the total cost contribution, but DFI, or in this case NI Water, not being in the position that they pay up their share.
Well, I'm happy to come back to you about Call Roundabout, but I don't want the Chair to suggest we're having 2 or 3 questions into one. But just before you come in, I agree with you in a sense. It's not only the British government that was elected on the hope that things would change. Our own administration has a responsibility to make change. And before you come in, I read out a list of initiatives and projects that are moving forward within DFI, because when I came into DFI the first time and this time, I said to my officials quite clearly, we can spend all day talking about what we can't do, or we can spend our time talking about what we can do. And we talk about what we can do and how we deliver. So it is an important point and a valid point. In terms of developer contributions, we are now currently examining as to whether we need legislation to allow developers to make contributions to wastewater treatment works. As you know, they already can do it in terms of separation of foul water from rainwater. We're saying, can we develop that further? What exactly that legislation will look like, I'm not at that point yet, Mark. What the policy will look like, I'm not at that point yet. That policy will have to be developed in conjunction with this committee and in consultation with developers and others as to how it would work. But I see it as one of a suite of solutions to the challenges NI Water face. Developer contributions, working with nature in terms of the SUDS bill and other initiatives we can carry forward, and working with my executive colleagues to secure additional funding for NI Water.
Thanks, Minister. Minister, you would share, I think, the same all-island outlook as myself. So I was wondering, just in terms of north-south collaboration, could the department be doing more in a range of fields? I know road safety is a key issue in that regard, as is road infrastructure. We know with the A5, the Irish government is contributing to that, and might even contribute more if we ask them nicely enough. I was just wondering, have you explored or are exploring more opportunities for cross-border collaboration?
Yes, and you use the example of road safety. I've asked it to be included in the themes for the sectoral meetings in relation to transport, because road deaths on both sides of this island are increasing, and we're facing similar challenges in that regard. So I think it is important that we discuss road safety on an all-island basis and learn lessons from each other.
Just to say at an official level, Minister, we have regular meetings with our colleagues through a whole range of different issues. For example, the All Island Rail Review. So these sorts of, and we have regular official meetings in support of the NSMC as well, and the Renewable process.
Thanks, Dennis. And finally, I'll come on to planning as well. And I know another member had raised it, Minister, and you kind of put most of it back on councils, to be fair, which I think councils are performing better than DFI when it comes to plan, and I know the point has been made previously about the quality of applications being received, but by their nature, the applications that DFI are receiving are major applications. We're talking here applications costing hundreds of thousands of pounds. We're not getting, and from companies who are developing all over Europe and beyond. It's not like they're putting in a couple of drawings in the back of a fag packet. Now, a couple of weeks ago we saw and we were delighted to see progress in terms of the validation checklist and being rolled out in councils, being told to get on with that work. But DFI, apparently there's a change in primary legislation would be required for DFI to introduce a validation checklist themselves. I was wondering how that is the case and what could be done, or would DFI maybe look at, I suppose, practicing what they are preaching to councils and introducing one?
Well, because of how the current legislation is set out, is the reason why we would require primary legislation to introduce a validation checklist for DFI. I'm not opposed to it, but it's how much time that would take and how much benefit you would get from the end of it. The reason I concentrate on councils is because 99%, if not more, of planning applications go through councils. And we have to respect the role of councils in that process. I think maybe during your time as DFI minister or DRD minister the legislation was brought through the Assembly and the Executive and was voted on and passed. So let's respect that. My challenge, I do challenge DFI, my officials, around planning. It's on the agenda for every planning meeting I do, around how we can improve our processes, how we can ensure that we're effective and efficient in the delivery of planning decisions, and how we intervene and interfere in the planning process, including call-ins. I'm firmly of the view, if a council decides it, a council lives with it. Now, there may be a legislative, and my officials will point to me a piece of legislation, but Minister, we have to do this, and in some circumstances we will have to do this, but my general rule of thumb is you decided, you live with it. So that in terms of the process moving forward, I will, as I said earlier, take a look at the validation checklist for DFI, but let's only move on it if it has a positive outcome and is a good use of my team's resources, this committee's resources, and the Assembly's time.
Even if there's a way of doing it in a pilot capacity that wouldn't require the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll just do a quick, if you're okay. There was a few people that wanted to ask a few more questions. I wanted to ask, just in relation to the programme for government and the investment strategy that I suppose will sit alongside that programme for government from an infrastructure point of view. Will that have contained within it models in terms of how we fund Northern Ireland Water going forward? As you've talked about the developer contribution, but I take it this investment strategy will be a few decades to go through in terms of Northern Ireland. So what will be the funding mechanisms that will be contained within it?
The investment strategy, how you fund NI Water is a political decision. So I don't see it as the role of the investment strategy to do that. The investment strategy is a forward work programme in terms of how we support and plan our infrastructure across all sectors moving forward. So I'm of the view, rightly or wrongly, that the Assembly and the Executive still support NI Water being subsidised through taxation or general taxation, that there's not a call or a support. There may be individuals or others, and they can speak for themselves, in terms of supporting the introduction of water charges. So the current model has the support of the Executive and the Assembly to move forward as it is. If there's a change to that, or someone seeks a change to that, they're perfectly entitled to do so. It's part of the system we operate in. But I'm going to leave it to them to bring it forward. I don't see it being in the investment strategy.
And then just to touch on the regional balance of our public transport system. Last night I did a quick check on TransLink's app. If I was to travel from where I live to get up to Stormont in the morning, it's quoting me 4 hours 35 minutes. That's an unacceptable situation. I would love to be able to use public transport to get to work, but despite the traffic chaos today, it was quicker for me to jump into the car. Do you see a role in how community transport can facilitate some rural transport connectivity, and with funding levels between TransLink and community transport to I suppose take up some of the slack there that's in relation to our public transport? I look at the Grand Central Station. We have an opportunity to increase capacity there, and I see rural transport as one way that we can increase capacity across our public transport system.
As I said, I think it was to Cahill earlier on, we have to invest in rural transport, because there's no point in me and other ministers telling people that we have to change our modal, or to have modal shift, and then saying, well, you can't, 4.5 hours to a job is just undoable. So working with TransLink and others, we have to ensure that we have a framework of transport in place that works for as many people as possible. I think there is a broader role for community transport. I recently held a meeting with the Health Minister and the DERA Minister and their officials to discuss just that, and there's a working group away to look at to see how all of our departments can support community transport moving forward to broaden their role, and yes, including how we ensure or how we use them to ensure that we have a rural transport system that is fit for purpose. Now, I'm using community transport in its broadest definition, just to be fair to all. So I am. But there is a role, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm going to come to the Deputy Chair, who's indicated first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just one issue, Minister, and that's in relation to unadopted developments and streets. Anecdotally, it appears to me that it seems to be becoming more prevalent. I know it's across the country, but to be parochial for a second, there's several in my hometown of Carrickfergus across East Antrim. One that the developer finished 16 years ago is currently allowed to be developing elsewhere. The road still hasn't been adopted. Street lights, as you know, can't be fixed. Road repairs, and the residents just become so frustrated, and it seems to go in just to do a really litigious, long drawn out process. Is there anything that can be done from a department point of view to try and overcome these issues?
I think this is an area that does require closer examination. I am seeing too many correspondence cases coming across my desk where residents of developments are being left in limbo because whether the developer has went bust or whatever it may be through that. So certainly I think the consumer rights of residents are not being protected fully.
Great.
So I haven't discussed this with my officials yet, but I do think it's something, whether it's my department or a broader or another department have to look at this, but I do think we have to examine the current legislation and strengthen it to protect, someone goes to buy a new home, it's probably the biggest investment of their lives.
Absolutely.
They want to live in an area that has, it's basic, a road, footpath and streetlights.
It's not what they are.
It's not, that's something you're promised when you buy the property. So I think it's something certainly we have to take a look at.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mark, I know that you were
Question per se, it's just I want to come in and declare, and just on that particular issue, someone who lives in a non-adopted site, and just the slightest bit about the difficulty that it's creating then for house sales, solicitors involved in the conveyance are becoming even more scrutinous, I suppose, of stuff, and that's impacting the housing market.
Thank you, Mark, because I will declare an interest as well as somebody that lives in an unadopted site as well. And I know the headache that it causes. But I do appreciate the correspondence, and I know we have corresponded on this before as well. Okay, Keith, I'm coming to you. Thanks for being patient.
Thanks. My question, Minister, is regarding schools and the 20 mile an hour signage that was put up. The range of schools was done probably about 2 years ago, and I think it's seen different correspondence that sort of you were assessing that and see how good that was. So can we get an update on that? And I had met officials, well, maybe 2-3 years ago, indicating my preference, and this is only me personally, for SIDS instead of those devices because it gives a better indication. That's my opinion. Police will say that some people look at SIDS and use that as an indication to drive as fast as you can. I don't personally see that. I think any time it flashes red, people broadly slow down. So where's the 20 mile an hour at going forward with additional schools and the possible introduction of SIDS instead of those?
Couple of points in this. It's bewildering that you have to tell somebody to drive slowly past the school. So it is literally bewildering that when you're driving past a school and there's children either leaving or going into it, that we have to put a sign in place to tell you to slow down. So I think that says something about some people within our society as much as anything. But in terms of the 20 mile an hour review, that is now complete. I have had an opportunity to discuss it with my officials, and it has been generally welcomed by teachers, parents and children. It was interesting reading the children's feedback on it as well. Their voices are important in this as well. I think moving forward we need a more targeted approach in terms of the schools that we put this system in place outside of, and that'll be our next step. But the next step in terms of my officials are going to arrange with the committee to come forward to give a presentation on the findings of the review, etc. So you will be fully informed in that regards as well. In terms of how do we achieve it and the signage used, what the most effective signage, as you say, some permanent signage people become used to, complacent about. The flashing signage catches people's eyes or causes an alert to them. So look, I'm open to persuasion and we'll use the best data in terms of how we move forward in the use of signage. It opens up another question as well in terms of 20 mile an hour zones. There's just no Wales moved in this direction, and it was broadly criticised because people believed they went too far and wasn't properly communicated to the reasons behind it. But I think there is grounds for examining it in residential areas where we reduce speeds from 30 mile an hour to 20 mile an hour in residential areas in terms of housing developments, etc. It may not be possible in terms of main thoroughfares, but it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about road safety. We have to drive home a message that speed kills and causes serious injury. So if one of the lessons from Wales has been the scheme, and which was implemented in a much broader way than I would consider, it has reduced speeding, it has reduced serious injury. So it has had a certain positive impact, but I think the controversy around it was unfortunate and led to opposition and the wrong conversation. So I wouldn't suggest that we introduce a 20 mile an hour zone across the board, but I do think in residential areas it is something we should consider.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. So, Minister, I'm conscious we've had a really good conversation today around renewables, planning, the planning system, electric buses, active travel, but I'm also conscious that the Department's removed its climate action forecast requirements. How confident are you that we'll meet our net zero targets in the future?
Well, we're working towards them, and the ZAVE mandate and other work this department is doing is all proactively focused on us working towards meeting our targets moving forward. We're working in collaboration with DERA and indeed the entire executive around that. It is a challenging figure, but I think we When we look at the consequences of climate change, we're talking about flooding in Downpatrick and elsewhere, we have no other choice but to meet them.
And then lastly, I got messages sent to me yesterday around the Belfast Grand Central Station. How confident, or can you confirm that all the new platforms meet the width and disability standards? Because it was expressed to me that potentially they don't. So are you able to confirm that today?
I'm aware of a number of rumours going around in relation to Grand Central Station. I have received no formal correspondence from TransLink that would suggest that any of the rumours, I'm not suggesting this is a rumour, but I have no confirmation that that is the case. The reasons for Grand Central Station not being open to rail at this moment in time is because we have to complete the safety standards to the regulations required. And I'm sure this is the view of the committee and my view and the view of my officials. It has to be of the highest standards, and that's the standard that we're seeking. And we're going through the process. We'll submit, TransLink are submitting papers to us. My officials review them and inspect them. Then they are forwarded on to the Rail Safety Authority for sign off or further questions. So there's a number of issues floating about. None of them have been confirmed to me, and I'm in regular engagement with my officials in this matter. As I said earlier, I'm meeting TransLink actually after this meeting, and a number of topics are on for discussion, including getting the trains back in operation again in Grand Central.
I mean, the only thing I would add to that, Minister, is the massive paperwork that's coming through and the massive reports. And as you'd expect with something like this, it would be a surprise if we hadn't built in, the up-to-date disability requirements. And certainly that hasn't been mentioned yet, as the Minister says. The only one thing, which one of the issues we've been looking at is the issue of the offset of the platforms, but but that's not so much about the platforms. There's a process where they adjust the rails, and you're talking about very, very minor, very fine adjustments that have to be to a very high tolerance level. So that's one issue that sort of has been looked at, but that's about as near as you get to talking about platforms at all.
It was expressed to me, and this is just a comment, not a question.
Yep.
It was expressed to me that the platforms are quite narrow, so maybe if you could just double check that the width guidelines are being met.
I'll raise it with TransLink at our following meeting, but as the Permanent Secretary has said, you're talking minor adjustments in some of these matters, even including the settlement of the ballast under the line can make the difference between when it meets regulations or it doesn't.
But we're finally to say we're always open to hearing. If as somebody said one time, we like to hear the good news, but we have to hear the bad news. So if there's anything comes up, and there will be inevitably issues coming up, I've no doubt we'll get that fed to us, and we'll try to respond appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cahill?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points, Chair, as part of the conversation, and I appreciate the question about the 20 mile per hour. I mean, but I have to say, Minister, in being out on site meeting DFI and meeting PSNA, especially rural schools, I mean, at home times there's 3 or 4 cars across the road. You can actually speed past them. Now, I'm not saying that's, and I raise that point in the fact that we're all trying to work together to road safety and all of that, but certainly there needs to be an element, and it may be within the code or within the driving system or theory test that it should be all about driver behaviour, to be honest with you. Because when you do the speed tests...
Sorry, Cahill, if you don't mind, if you have a question.
I have a chair, because I just want to put it this way, because it's following on from what was said earlier. I mean, if we're serious about road safety, then the likes of those things should be brought up through theory testing or when they're doing driving tests. And I'm not blaming all the young people, because when you see the testing out on the ground by PSNA, a lot of the people who are questioned about travelling at 50 miles an hour are local people, so they know the roads. So my question, Minister, for consideration is, when people are doing testing, be it the theory or practical, a conversation about speeding and road safety, and that should be actually thought about, to be honest, to have that conversation. I'm not blaming all young people doing it, but I do see a station number of speeding, and we've all been there. So the more conversation we have about road safety. My other point then is just on the...
Cahill, I do have people on the list here as well.
I appreciate it, Chair, but we quickly went through it. The Minister, we're travelling for 2 hours to get just a quick conversation. The issue of if area plans. And we're talking here about NAW, and we're talking about developing units, because I know that anybody who responded to area plans, each area has identified a number of units that would build over projections, you call them, but they're units, they're housing units. Where are we? Can you respond in relation to area plans, or any commentary around where the local area plans are at the minute, Minister?
Yeah, there are several councils that have completed their area plans, their local development plans, as they're known. And then there's a number with the going through an appeals process. There's a number with my department for signing off, and then there's a number of councils. Maybe Dennis has the note just in terms. I'll give you the breakdown of figures that haven't reached that point yet. But it's important. Well, there's a number of important phases within the local development plans, and obviously councils play a crucial role in that. But until the local development plan comes out of the council, then there's nothing I can do in terms of my department. So the quicker it comes out of the council, the better it moves through the various stages. In terms of the housing numbers within each plan, there is, I'm trying to think of the right term, but there is figures given to each of the councils in terms of projections from my department, but they're only guidance figures. If a council can come, and the councils will come forward, and councils have come forward with alternative figures and given justification for those figures, those have went through the necessary process and agreement has been found. So it's no one is turning around to a council and saying your housing projection is X, we don't move from that. That's not the case. The councils have a right to come forward and say, no, we need this amount of houses, and this is the rationale why we need those houses. Belfast, as an example, was quite a significant increase in the housing because they came forward with the rationale.
Sorry, Permanent Secretary, we do have details in our packs today of the local development plans and where they are currently at, and that's at page 239 for members, so we do have that in our packs today, so thank you. I think there was a question around a driver testing.
Yes,
and
the member's right, it's not just young people who speed, it's across the age range. The danger with young people speeding is probably they don't have the experience of operating the vehicle, but there's no reason for anybody to be speeding. I am looking at the graduated driver licence, which was passed through the 2016 bill, but the commensurate order was never signed off on. There is quite a significant investment required to move that forward, and I am seeing if we can secure the investment to move that forward. But it is, I met with the Road Safety Partnership yesterday from the Northwest, and they were actually presenting the view that drivers should be tested at intervals throughout their lifetime to ensure that they are familiar with the highway code and the impact of speeding, etc. Now, I'm not suggesting we do that, but I do think that all drivers just need to be conscious that speeding kills and causes serious injury.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Just touching on sort of the road safety comments, and it's important to bring up. It seemed to be a decrease in spending on road safety awareness and education, and it's been restored. But will it return to sort of pre-pandemic levels of funding?
I'm looking at options as to how we fund our road safety campaigns, and we're spending around over £200,000 at this stage on road safety campaigns, and we're using it in a different way, in an innovative way. We're spending a lot of time on social media, engaging with drivers through that forum, and I have to commend and welcome the support of the sporting codes in that. We've seen recent support from Conor Bradley, from Jacob Stockdale, from members of the Armagh squad, and also GAA. Rory Grugan has come forward, and their participation in that has been really, really beneficial and benefited our campaign in raising awareness of the campaign for Road to Zero. There has been, in terms of the Road Safety Partnership, and I know there has been some questions and justifiable questions around underspends in recent times. I'm actively, or my officials are actively engaging with the partnership to ensure, and there's been work done by the Department of Justice to ensure that we have a broader framework within the working to ensure that money's being spent to its full capacity. Should we return to TV advertising? I would like to, but I want to be assured that the TV advertising we do is based on the best evidence available to us, and we're targeting the right audience. The advertising, the key to advertising is that you're targeting the right people through that, so I'm trying to secure funding for that as well.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. We'd spoken earlier and throughout, I suppose, about how challenging a time it is for the public sector. It's also still a very challenging time for the public in terms of the cost of just about everything. Minister, my question, I'd written about this when you were caretaker or interim minister back a couple of years ago, and it was around PCNs for parking enforcement. The fine is £90, but you get a 45% or 50%, £45 or 50% discount if you pay within 2 weeks. Now, the argument I was trying to make, or the case I was trying to present at the time, is that the only person, therefore, who wouldn't pay within the 2 weeks is someone who could easily afford £90, or someone who couldn't afford the £45, depending when the ticket came, how far away from payday they were. And that, I know councils have responsibility for off-street parking, so this is something I'm doing separately with them. But I was wondering, Minister, if that's something you might look at, even extending the discount period. I've got FOIs and stats to show it wouldn't make a big pile of difference in terms of cash flow to the department. So I was wondering if that's something you might look at.
And I've said this recently to a number of organisations I've met who had met earlier on in my time as Minister, when we were trying to grapple with the budget and trying to establish exactly what the implications of the budget were on our forward work programme. We have now done that, so you can peek above the parapet and try and see into the future a wee bit more now with officials. I will examine it on the basis that if we have got the capacity within the department to do it, based against all the other priorities we have within the department to do it. But it's worth reminding why parking fines are handed out. It's not to annoy motorists, it's to ensure that there is free-flowing traffic through our towns and villages, not only for commercial and private usage, but also to ensure that emergency vehicles can access it. Also, parking fines, when no one likes getting them, they're there for a reason. It's to dissuade people from parking illegally. So the best way to avoid any penalty is don't park illegally.
No, I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be penalised. I'm just asking that people shouldn't be penalised double for being poor.
Well, I don't accept that analysis, and I'm not aware of any other system within any element of our government where that argument is brought forward. We're not penalising people for being poor. We're penalising people for parking illegally.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I should declare an interest as somebody who's had parking tickets before too. Keith?
I just want to follow on quickly from Andrew's point, and we did discuss in the past road safety partnership. My question to us is, what influence does AFI have on road safety partnership broadly? And you're probably aware that that 2.1 million figure returned this past 3 years. Had you, as a department, any influence to say, you know, we can spend on X, Y, or Z within the road safety partnership? And why is that returned if we don't have visual campaigns as much as we should have on the television audible ones on the radio?
We're members of the road safety partnership. It is led by the PSNI, and other departments and agencies sit on it. There has previously been underspends and returns in that regard, and it was partly to do with the structure of how the various agencies could spend the money. Now, working with the Department of Justice and them working with the Treasury, that has now been broadened out as to how we can spend the money, which I believe will allow for a more comprehensive spending of that funds. The Partnership Board is also going to employ a projects manager, which will give a more structured basis to the work programme of the partnership, and in turn then allow for the proper spending and full spending, I would hope, of those funds. As I said earlier, I've tasked my officials with engaging with the partnership to ensure that we are maximising the usage of any funds available to us from it.
Just to finalise on that, the SIDS, and I've worked with several communities to raise funds to buy SIDS, and there were roughly £3,000 in that area, where private people is running coffee mornings to buy these things, and then in conjunction with PCSP fit them in local villages. But that 2.1 million would buy an awful lot of SIDS. And I appreciate it doesn't make everybody slow down, but it indicates people shouldn't be speeding. But it's disappointing that that's been returned, considering what it could have done.
Well, as I say, I think we have to work from the research and data available to us to what is the best practice for road safety, and follow that route.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you. Minister, thank you for your time. I just have a question, or I suppose a comment to make. Obviously, you'll be aware this week in terms of Andy Allen, a colleague of ours, had some issues in terms of Birmingham Airport, and you touched in your opening statement around inclusive travel for everyone. So I put the question to you as Minister. We had an Intech in last week, and I know that you have met them. So what are you aiming to do, and what are you trying to do to ensure that things like this do not happen again? We heard very powerfully last week that in terms of June Best, who has a guide dog and had taxis drive off when they seen that she had a guide dog. So things like that should not be happening in 2024. So as Minister, what are you trying to do to improve travel for people with disabilities?
Yeah, what happened to Andy was totally unacceptable, as was the case with June as well. There should be no discrimination against anyone with a disability. And I, as Minister, have a responsibility for that. I work closely with MTAC and work with them, as do my officials, to ensure that policies and procedures we're bringing forward ensure that they're fit for purpose for all our citizens, including those with disabilities. And I welcome the fact that in the design of Grand Central Station there was considerable work done with MTAC to ensure that the highest standards were met, and where lessons have to be learned, I'll continue to do those. In terms of the taxi industry, as you know, my role within the taxi is regulations of licences, etc. It's not the day-to-day operation of taxis. I have met with the taxi industry, and they face challenges. I accept they face challenges, and I'll continue to work with them to see how we can assist them.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, in terms of the union connectivity review, what discussions and progress have you had with your department and the Department for Transport in relation to that review?
We've had some success with that review in terms of funding for feasibility studies, particularly in relation to the all-line rail review and the Armagh Portadown line connection. So we have had good success with that. I've had a brief conversation with the new Secretary for Transport, Louise Hay, and I mentioned it to her during those conversations as well, that in terms of the union connectivity review, that it's important that we're not forgot about, and that where there is possibility for funding or work to be done, that we should be included in it. Now, in fairness, that was in her early days in office, and we are to continue those conversations both at official and a ministerial level.
Well, look, Minister, there's 35 questions there in an hour and a half or so. We're letting you out 2 minutes early. I promise you you'd be out by 10:30, so we have kept to that. And look, I do want to put on record, thank you to yourself, the Permanent Secretary, and to your staff. We do appreciate whenever we're sending correspondences in. We do appreciate the responses that we do get back, and we appreciate the work that is going on the ground. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next ministerial question time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, members. Okay, hopefully you all felt you had an opportunity to ask the questions that you wanted to. Is there any questions that you felt you wanted to follow up on, or was anything else that you wanted to ask to the Minister?
One there, Chair. Appreciate the Minister may not have seen that. It was in our table packs, the shop mobility communication.
Yeah.
So I presume we'll get a response that he has sent to them back to us as well, will we?
We can request that, yeah.
I didn't really, well, he probably may not have seen that, to be fair. It's only went on the Friday, so he may not have read that yet at this stage.
Okay. Members, do you mind if we take just a 5-minute break at this stage? Just and then we'll come back to our agenda, if that's okay.
That's good.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
One out west, okay, right there.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're now going to move on to Chairperson's business. And as you've heard, I referenced there about Andy Allen and our colleague in the Assembly with the problems he had in terms of lack of assistance onto the airplane in Birmingham Airport. So I was just on the back of IMTech being in and all the issues that we heard from them. I suppose from this committee we want to say to Andy that it's awful that that happened to him, but unfortunately this is not a unique scenario, and certainly through the committee we want to ensure that we are dealing with those issues. And I was pleased to hear today that the Minister is trying to progress accessible and inclusive travel for everyone, and hopefully we can play our role as a committee. So perhaps Deputy Chair, if you could pass that on to Mr. Allen, would be deeply appreciative.
By all
if you
means,
could
Chair.
do that. And
Absolutely.
I was also thinking maybe it would be worthwhile just to check in with Belfast City Airport and with International Airport to see what their policies and procedures are just in relation to people who are travelling through their airports, because certainly even from a tourism point of view we wouldn't want people coming into Northern Ireland and their view of Northern Ireland being tainted by lack of provision.
City of Derry Airport.
Oh, and City of Derry Airport too, yes.
I'll pass
Thank
it
you.
on, Chair.
Said, but make sure record that City of Derry. Chair, it would be one interesting thing was, and we all share in the treatment of what happened to Andy, but it'd be interesting to find out, can we get more figures in terms of people who this has happened? Maybe IMTAC would have figures. Could be some annual figures this happened, incidents been reported, or maybe people just, just for our own reference.
Okay, Cal, the Deputy Chair.
That's a very valid point, and I think one of the things that Andy's dignified response has proven and shown through social media is just how prevalent this issue is, and sadly a light is not often shone on those people. Andy was able to use his position through social media to garner that, and he was able to make headline national news on that. On the back of that, you've seen dozens and dozens of people, as Cal rightly says, who have been affected in a similar way, and that is disgraceful. So I do think we need to hear more from that, and commend Andy for highlighting it, because if it happens once it's unacceptable, but it seems to be happening on a daily basis across all different ways of travel. And the airport, I think, are launching an investigation into that and need to do so. And apologies not simply enough anymore. It's not just something. It's not just a drop with the ball. It is an unacceptable thing to happen. It should never happen. Yeah. And the fact that we know it's happening daily is totally unacceptable. But I will pass on your remarks, Chair, to Andy and everything on the committee.
100%. Just from the chairs, or from the committee as a whole, I think the remarks come from John Stewart.
Cathal, just in terms of your proposal, are you wanting to check with the airport of any incidences in terms of us writing to them?
Andy highlighted, and it's just all the people have said to me, and I know, I'm sure there's people out there who never said that and just get on with what I'm saying to you. It'd be good to factually just back it up. I appreciate what we're saying on, but I think as a piece of work for the committee, we could write and say, listen, people have been notified, we know this is an ongoing thing and we'd like to see it end. So maybe IMTAC would have the figures, I don't know. It's just, if we get some facts, it would back it up. But certainly we should write to all the airports and write to every facility, to be fair.
I think if we, just from an infrastructure point of view, if we write to the airports in relation to Northern Ireland, and we can ask them, if there has been,
and go back to IMTAC to see if they had many complaints as well, just or whoever it is.
Everyone content with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm now moving to item 5, which is the draft minutes. Page 43 is the draft minutes of proceedings for the meeting on the 18th of September 2024. I'm seeking agreement that members are content that the minutes are a true and accurate reflection of the meeting on the 18th of September 2024. And if so, I'll sign the minutes. So, are you content?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 6 is matters arising. So at page 10 of the table pack, you'll see correspondence from the Electric Vehicle Association Northern Ireland following the evidence session on the 18th of September. I just want to inform members that Ivani has provided some follow-up information regarding the use of an old policy document. Do you remember that was referenced during our session? That was, and this is included now. The old policy document that was referred to during the evidence session and including the copy correspondence from DFI. So I'm just seeking agreement to forward the correspondence to DFI to request an update on the discussions with the strategic planning on this issue. All content? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 7, which is the Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate, National Franchise Dealers Association oral evidence. At page 53, you'll see the Clerk's memo. At page 55, you'll see the National Franchise Dealers Association the mandate position paper. And at page 62, you'll see the Department for Infrastructure update on the Vehicle Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 19th September 2024. So we are having our is everybody online joining us? Yeah. So we have the following representatives who are joining remotely. We have Mr. Simon Cook, Head of Association, National Franchise Dealers Association, with Brian Robinson, Member of the National Franchise Dealers Association, Franchise Director of Agnews. We have Dave Sharon, Member of the National Franchise Dealers Association and Group Managing Director of Donnelly Motor Group. So just before we begin our session, I just want to check that everybody joining us remotely can hear us okay and that we can hear them. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah, and we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Super, thank you. So again, members, I'm just checking that you're content that the evidence session is recorded by Hansard. Content? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for joining us remotely today. We're greatly appreciative for you joining us on this important issue. We obviously have some of your written evidence that you've provided to the committee, and we appreciate that and thank you for that. So I'm just asking for a brief opening statement, and then I'm quite keen to come to member statements. So if you could briefly just talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll come to member statement or to questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. To the committee, allowing us to present our position paper, obviously on the proposed introduction of the ZEV mandate in Northern Ireland. Just a bit of background about us. We as the National Franchise Dealers Association currently represent approximately 3,500 dealer members across the UK and Northern Ireland. So just to give you an overview of the current situation, battery electric vehicle sales in the UK, the new car market is at risk of plateauing. Year-to-date figures show that BEVs currently command a market share of 17.2% in the new car market, well below the initial ZEV mandate target of 22% for 2024. An even more pessimistic story is emerging in the van market, in which year-to-date figures indicate BEVs under 3.5 tonnes hold a market share of only 4.8%, a decrease of 0.5% when compared to the same point last year. Critically, both car and van year-to-date market shares are well below the ZEV mandate targets for this year of 22% and 10% respectively. Rather than paying fines, manufacturers may choose to exit the Northern Ireland market completely, which is already facing disruption due to chronic MOT backlogs and recent issues with type approval, limiting dealer access to certain stock. This could result in reduced consumer choice, higher vehicle prices, and an overall negative impact on the Northern Ireland consumers. What we as NFDI are asking for, we're calling for a critical grace period before the mandate is introduced to ensure dealers have adequate time to be able to purchase BEV stock to then meet the thresholds. And if Northern Ireland is to implement a ZEV mandate, NFDA propose a realignment of the targets to better suit Northern Ireland's market. A gentler profile of targets would enable manufacturers and retailers a more reasonable timeframe to complete the transition to EVs, potentially starting at 18% in 2025 and a more gradual trajectory towards the 100% target for 2035. Currently for cars, in the last month, the current new EV car registrations for the UK are sitting at a market share of 17.2%. If approved in Northern Ireland without any changes, the ZEV mandate would start with a 28% electric vehicle target for new car sales in 2025, in line with the rest of the UK. These targets could potentially rise if the UK government decides to bring the 2035 phase-out date back to 2030. For vans, the minimum ZEV mandate target trajectory for new vans sold begins at 10% in 2024 and reaches 70% in 2030 on the way to 100% in 2035. For vans, the market is struggling to reach even just the 10% target in 2024. EV market share for vans has actually decreased compared to last year, with year-to-date figures from 2023 at 5.3% market share, falling to 4.8% this year so far. The target for 2025 is set at 16%, which seems completely unachievable. In regards to the vehicle manufacturers, when we look at the OEM comparison tracker, which we've supplied you in the briefing paper, companies such as Volkswagen and Ford, who are historically volume brands, aren't estimated to hit the 22% target. Several other brands, including Hyundai, Toyota, Nissan, Jaguar Land Rover and Mazda, are still far behind from reaching the 22% target. Manufacturers who do not meet the required threshold will have to pay penalties of £15,000 per non-compliant car. Similarly, in the van market, manufacturers will have to pay penalties of £9,000 per non-compliant van in 2024, with this figure increasing to £18,000 from 2025 onwards. These are hefty penalties if manufacturers are unable to leverage credits, running into the hundreds of millions. The impact on the dealers and the economy for Northern Ireland, this is a serious concern amongst the dealer network that the automotive industry within Northern Ireland could collapse. It remains that many manufacturers do not have a clear EV plan, with some businesses looking to move to hybrid as a mode of transition. Some have even indicated that without demand stimulation from government, and rather than facing strict fines, they will instead pull out of the UK entirely, in other instances to not pay penalties. If this were to happen, the impact on the UK market could be significant. Established brands withdrawing could result in fewer choices for consumers compared to their European and US counterparts, which could, in turn, have the knock-on effect of driving up prices for the remaining brands. This is already happening, with some brands having removed popular models to streamline their inventory, e.g. the Ford Fiesta. The situation is even worse in Northern Ireland, where car sales account for approximately around 2% of the UK registrations. This is compounded by the fact that international manufacturers still view the UK as a relatively small market, and any attempt to force demand could be seen as excessive and not worth the investment. Similarly, this will ultimately lead to less choice for the Northern Ireland consumer, which will in turn lead to car prices increasing. Dealers are at the mercy of the OEM partners. NFDA members account for some of the largest companies in the motor trade industry, with automotive retail employing approximately 14,000 people across Northern Ireland. If the ZEV mandate is to be introduced as potentially proposed, it will have a hugely detrimental impact on the dealer network, employment, and thus the wider automotive industry in the province.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. I suppose my first question, we are acting as 4 jurisdictions moving together on this. And so we would be in line with the rest of the UK when we are moving along with this. There was a consultation on the mandate, and car manufacturers overwhelmingly stated their desire that Northern Ireland is included in the mandate. So there are no manufacturers that operate independently in Northern Ireland, and I'm keen to try and ascertain from you. You talked there in terms of targets not being met. Have you had any discussions or any indication that the government is going to bring forward or increase, given that manufacturers aren't meeting their targets, as you have indicated there? Because surely then that would be strange for the government to try and do that and put pressure on the manufacturers that way.
Well, I think currently the target's set, and the concern is from the manufacturers that they're not reaching the targets. I don't believe there is any position that the targets will be changed, but it's just the fact that we're going now into the last quarter of the first year of the ZEV mandate being introduced, and there are several manufacturers that are way off.
So I think you'd said in your briefing paper that manufacturers may choose to exit the NI market. Can you point to that in any way?
Well, I don't know whether my colleagues online, obviously some of the discussions that they've had directly with the manufacturers, can sort of elaborate on that for me.
If I can comment, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to participate. I think as manufacturers approach the last 3 months of the year, clearly the targets are very much front of mind. And the feeling has been that there are two ways to achieve the target. One is to sell the appropriate number of electric vehicles per se, and the other is actually to suppress the sale of combustion engine vehicles as a way of achieving the same ratio. So at this point, I wouldn't be able to say exactly how it will pan out for each manufacturer, but certainly the fear of losing production of ICE vehicles remains a concern. And NI being 2% of the overall UK number for vehicle sales, we could easily become a bywater in this situation.
So there's an assertion, I suppose, that in terms of Northern Ireland, that the automotive industry could collapse. So why are we more vulnerable than the rest of the UK?
That also adds into the fact that we have potentially the concern with the type approval, GB type approval, and manufacturers not being able to get vehicles into the country because of the incorrect type approval for their vehicles. So there's another factor that's adding into this concern with regards to the ZEV mandate.
Okay, I'm going to move to the Deputy Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman, for coming along today and for your presentation. Just to follow up on that, the first point is around, is Northern Ireland a less appealing place for someone to purchase an EV car compared to the rest of the United Kingdom? Is that one of the reasons, one of the barriers to EV car sales, in your opinion?
Current market data is the EV share is 17.2%. UK, NI is 11.9. So based on existing pricing and consumer appetite, we are running at a sort of a delta of 5%. Compared to the overall UK average. So I think the barriers to adoption would be the vehicle cost per se, a level of uncertainty around EV, general press and media comment, infrastructure in terms of charging infrastructure, the delta between home charging cost and public charging cost, and incentives to purchase where effectively fleet and business customers have been much quicker to adopt EV compared to retail or private buyers.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. That's really useful, and that's anecdotally what I suppose I'm hearing. Is there a geographical spread in that as well? I'm assuming it's more it's more appealing in someone who's living city-wise compared to potentially more west of the province. Are you noticing that for your dealerships and for those trying to sell those vehicles?
I don't have that level of detail unfortunately.
Okay, no problem. Might be something to look into. Just to move on to then the gentler profile of targets. I know, Simon, you referred to this, and there's an illustrative, for example, version of an example of what that could be. I'm just wondering how impactful you think that would be, and is that something you're proposing primarily for Northern Ireland as opposed to the rest of the UK, or is that something that you would be seeing to be, those figures would be rolled out across the United Kingdom?
No, that would be for Northern Ireland, just to have that more gentle sort of trajectory, and we can't expect the Northern Ireland market to react to a 28% 2025 target. That would just be absolutely shooting us in the foot. So if we can look at maybe softening that entry level percentage, would make a massive difference, I think.
And the targets, the example version you gave in there, I mean, you think they are feasible, or still going to be challenging in your opinion, but feasible?
They would still be a struggle. They would still be a struggle, and as Brian alluded to, you're still way behind the current UK figures in regards to the battery electric vehicle sales. I think on your initial point as well, in regards to the infrastructure, that will be a key driver to getting people into these vehicles. And the main concern from a consumer's perspective is where are they going to charge?
Yeah.
So it's a sort of two-folded concern, really.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Just one last point, Simon, I'm not sure who to take this. You referred to the offsetting or the banking that that dealerships can do with other jurisdictions and areas. Is that can you just talk me through how that works for the dealerships and how they're able to offset some of those targets?
Sorry, in regards to
the ability for dealers or manufacturers to bank or to offset some of their targets through sales elsewhere.
Well, that would be from the manufacturer's perspective. There is an implied target because of a lot of this relates to the CO2 emissions of their hybrid vehicles as well.
Okay.
So although they'll have the initial sort of ZEV 22% target, there is an implied target that sits behind that in regards to their hybrid sales or their CO2 emission sales of ICE vehicles. So they can offset it to a certain percentage, but the concern is they're not reaching the BEV targets to generate that sort of letter target for the hybrids.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, Brian, and Dave, for your presentation today. I'm just wondering, what kind of length of time are you looking for a grace period? And can you maybe detail for us some of the negative experiences that were experienced by your members in Great Britain?
Well, the grace period could be as long as possible in theory. Hopefully we could push it back 2 or 3 years to allow the infrastructure in Northern Ireland to be in a position where consumers will adopt. The issues that we're having in the UK with particular dealer members is getting the charge point access to the dealerships as well. There is a serious backlog, potentially 18-month backlog, just to get the DNO facilities into the dealership to put some charging infrastructure at ground level. So that again is a massive concern for our dealers in the UK, and no doubt that would be an increased concern to the Northern Ireland members as well when that comes to fruition.
Yeah, 18 months is a figure that I've heard from charge operators. It was just raised actually in the last session with the Minister and the Permanent Secretary. Have you carried out any assessment of consumer behaviour and consumer understanding over here about their desire for increased EV vehicles?
Not yet. It's something we need to focus on. I don't know whether my members on the call will be able to give us any sort of insight in regards to feedback that they've had from consumers.
I think the appetite amongst the retail consumer is somewhat muted. There is, if you look at the shares that BEV takes of the retail segment, it's actually declined year on year. In 23, 6.8% of all the retail sales in Northern Ireland were electric, and it's running at 4.5% this year. There's lots of misinformation, conflicting information in the marketplace about deadlines for switching, the effectiveness or not of the cost of running the vehicles. So there's lots of noise in the system, and whilst there's a level of curiosity about about electric, and you do get asked the question, should I be thinking about electric? It's a decision that's most of the retail customers that we deal with are postponing to maybe the next purchase. There's generally a lack of, Brian picked up on this, there's generally a lack of stimulus in the retail market or incentive in the retail market to buy an electric vehicle, where there is huge stimulus in the fleet market. So part of the problem that we have in Northern Ireland is the fleet market. As a region, the fleet market in Northern Ireland will be the smallest in proportion to the total market of all the other three regions. So there's an inbuilt bias to the calculation in Northern Ireland, in that the weighting that fleet has in the overall UK achievement, which is why you see 17% penetration, is driven by fleet. So until there's retail stimulus either across the UK or specifically here in Northern Ireland, the retail consumer is the one that's going to drive take up here. And without the stimulus and without the infrastructure going into place, it's very difficult to see how we catch up to the UK average even at this point.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you,
On
Keith.
Dave's point, whilst the car market in NI has risen by 10% year on year, if you split that into private and fleet, the private market is actually back by 9%, and the fleet element is up by 21%. So you have a distortion within the two market sectors.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Keith now.
Yeah, gentlemen, thanks for coming along. I'm just a wee bit unclear. Are we saying in layman's terms that 17% is the UK electric vehicle sales? Am I correct in saying that? 17% total UK?
Yes.
Right.
That's correct.
So that's obviously combined of 4 nations. What's the breakdown of those 4 nations?
I don't have that detail, unfortunately, but we can certainly find out for you.
Right.
Well, the Northern Ireland content is
NI is
11.9. So
11.9.
11.9. So the other 3 nations are clearly higher. I would say England has the highest. Don't have the figures to hand, but I'd be 99% sure England would be the highest.
It'd be good on
part of that is the structure of the market when you balance out the relative weightings of fleet, Motability and retail.
So I didn't see it, and maybe I've missed it. In our paper, is there a breakdown of the weightings per fleet sales, private sales across the whole of UK? Because we need to see how good Northern Ireland's contributing or not contributing to this problem. We'll call it a problem. So it'd be interesting to see what that 11.9 is made up of. I appreciate Dave, you made the point about fleet and private, but it'd be good to see what the rest of the UK make up to that figure. And then am I correct in saying 2% of sales in Northern Ireland is new vehicles of the whole of United Kingdom? 2%? Yeah?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So 11% mightn't be bad if we don't do the rest of the figures in the UK. 11.9. I know it's a long way of 22, I think the target, I'm right in saying, but we need to see what the figures in the rest of the nations are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that to hand, but I can certainly get it over to you guys.
Because we're smaller, if you look on down with less chargers, but we may be as good based on, percentage-wise. So it'd be good to see that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Cahill?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just obviously, Dave, you're saying there, there's a couple of issues, and I know you've talked about infrastructure and everything else, but it seems to me the challenge is obviously between manufacturing and also the consumer and getting the message out and incentivising people, and that's a key element. And my question is, what more can be done in relation to that matter, and also obviously grace period. You've looked at the mandate. How do you perceive that happening? Is that a case of a regulatory change, or is legislative change, or is it just policy, or how do you perceive that? If we ask for a grace period or supported that, how do you perceive that coming through?
I think recognising the fact that NI at 11.9% against it, an average of 17.2, so that's 5% delta is already inbuilt, based on like product and pricing this year. So that's the starting point going into next year.
And how would we address the grace period issue? How do we communicate that, or where do you see the challenge in that?
I think it's just relaying the fact of how far behind the potential market is in Northern Ireland currently. I think the situation that we face is potentially going into 2025 at 28% target is just so far ahead of what you guys are currently achieving, and it just needs to be reviewed. When we look at the grace period, I think it's more of a reduction in the target than a timescale. It's more of a review to independently look at Northern Ireland outside of the UK market.
I think the inherent danger is that if it's a UK-wide target for a manufacturer, let's say it's 28%, that the manufacturer will simply apportion 28% of my annual target or sales contract, which would give me an unsustainable number of EVs to be absorbed into this marketplace. There is a counter issue, which is type approval, which potentially will have further implications around the management of vehicle supply into NI, and will make that more difficult to manage.
Brian, you mentioned the offset of combustion. I might have heard you correctly in this, or maybe I didn't understand you properly, in terms of EV versus the combustion, because it can meet the target. Is that an easier route to travel, or is that for here, or would that play a part?
That's a route that manufacturers will be actively considering, and are probably already actually impacting that. If you look at order times, build times for combustion cars, they are stretching out, almost certainly because manufacturers are withholding supply to try and get their EV ratio near the 22%.
Okay,
so that's detrimental to consumers.
No, that's what I thought you said. Just a final point then, in terms of conversations, who you've had conversations with in terms of consumers, manufacturers, government, or anything else. Where has been the conversations there, or has there been any? Obviously with manufacturers and that, but in terms of government or discussions, has there been any discussions? Yeah.
Not in regards to Northern Ireland as yet, but we have had discussions, obviously, with the Department of Transport in regards to the UK targets. Unfortunately, they're saying that they're not movable at this current status. So it is a concern. So we just need to make sure that going forward, if Northern Ireland are going to join in, we can have a review of the current situation and don't impose these large targets going forward.
Okay, thank you very much for your responses. Thank you on your presentation.
Okay, Mark, were you looking in?
Thank you, gents. It's interesting and alarming in equal measure. Just in terms, I suppose, of he says the fleet, or the percentage of fleet vehicles in the north here was smaller than in other jurisdictions. Yeah, that represents the biggest uptake. I don't know if you guys have done, or maybe it's our place to do some sort of analysis of public sector fleet and what effort government departments and arm's length bodies and councils have done to actually, I suppose, electrify their fleets, because that could drive the number up or the percentage up considerably. I know your main concern is the commercial customer or the private customer, but it could help us in terms of performance, and also, of course, it's I suppose government leading by example, and if people see, I suppose, public bodies putting their faith in electric vehicles, they're perhaps more likely to follow suit.
Sorry, just to come in, I think we might have some research. I think there was a research paper maybe last week included, may have some figures. Yeah. But I wonder, do the Simon or Brian or or David there, do you have any information that might point to it as well?
I don't personally know. No.
No, only anecdotal that there is interest in the public on the public procurement side of things in electric vehicles. So we're already seeing some uptake of electric within sort of, let's call it the government fleets or local authority fleets. I think where the fleet market is strong in the broader UK or the GB market would be in the leasing sector, where there are tax incentives on company car drivers to adopt benefit in kind saving vehicles. And also there's a proliferation of the salary sacrifice scheme, which again is a tax efficient way to purchase a vehicle. So we just simply don't have the numbers of companies, employees or people on the higher rate of tax in Northern Ireland to participate as fully as some of the other regions in that. So tax incentives to a large degree are driving the uptake of the fleet sector. We're a smaller fleet sector. There is some uptake.
Are they the only incentives currently in the other areas?
Well, the incentives are available to all of the regions. It's not unique. It's just the volume of people eligible to take them up in Northern Ireland will be significantly lower than in the other three regions. So by dint, we may be taking a fair share of a small market, but when you blend that when you take that weighting into consideration, it results in us being 5% behind the UK average. Really, where the overall ZEV target will be achieved across the UK, including here, will be when there's some momentum in the retail market, and until there's momentum in the retail market through incentives or whatever other mechanisms, it will be very difficult for us to get back onto the glide path. So we have a sort of structural imbalance in Northern Ireland. If the structural imbalance is removed in the UK, then we will naturally catch up. But we are just in a market where there is less opportunity in the fleet segment.
No, I know about the structural imbalance. All right, but in terms of, I suppose, those incentives, they had existed previously around electric vehicles. Could you enlighten us as to when they went and why? It seems that they took them away when we needed them most.
There was the plug-in charge grant in place under the previous government, but I think just the cost effectiveness of running that scheme went against the government. Obviously, the uptake of that initially was very strong, and it drove the retail market, I think, into electric vehicles. But as soon as that plug-in charge grant was removed, the retail market for BEVs just collapsed, really, and it was quite significant. I think that was probably about April, May time of last year.
I think once you fulfil the need for early adopters, which was done with the grant incentive, then the market starts to flatten out. You're looking at a transactional pricing level. You're looking at probably a 20% difference between an ICE and an EV for similar models. So that's a barrier, a hurdle for the private consumer.
Yeah.
And you're now looking at roughly a 4-time or multiple of 4 for public charging. Rapid public charging compared to home charging is about 4 times more expensive. So you're now seeing articles in the press where a journey using public charging is actually more expensive than either diesel or petrol, and that wasn't the situation previously. Once you had bought your EV, you could be deemed to be fueling that for a lot less than either diesel or petrol. That is changing.
Yeah, you were going to make up the price difference.
You're going to offset some of the price gap. That's correct. Yeah.
And just finally, I don't know if you'll have the figures. It was just around, we know we're at 11.9%, UK average 17.2. Do we know what the penetration percentage of the market is in the Republic of Ireland?
We do. Just bear with me for.
It would be similar, I suppose, in terms of geography.
It's 13.5.
13.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that what I'm looking at is correct, yeah.
Okay. No, that's dead on. Thanks, gents.
Okay, Mark, sorry, a reference there about the paper last week. There was, we were just checking up there. There was a small indication, so we maybe get that checked up with the department in relation to the progress, if you're content with that. Sorry, Brian, I'd listened there in relation to your contribution to Cahill, just in relation to the type approval issue. Just so that I'm clear, what exactly is that? What is the issue there?
Simon, do you want to just overview that? Maybe
Yeah, just in layman's terms, we have an issue with regards to manufacturers seeking type approval to sell cars within GB now. The GB has its own type approval jurisdiction. And manufacturers are then saying to sell vehicles into Northern Ireland, potentially they are going to need dual approval, an EU approval and a GB approval to sell the vehicles back from the Northern Ireland market back to the UK. And a lot of the manufacturers are alluding to the fact that they're not willing to go down that route and having vehicles dual approved.
Which manufacturers are those?
Each manufacturer probably has a different scenario. I think the starting point certainly for one of our large groups was that the cars would have dual approval, either to be UK mainland or NI. But as the EU and the GB approvals diverge, they're not able to accommodate that logistically.
That's a GB and Northern Ireland issue.
Cars were factories built cars to what they called a UK specification, which meant that they were England, Scotland, Wales, and NI. But at the point where Brexit happened, then you get a divergence between the two approval levels, EU and what is now GB. So manufacturers appear to be moving towards building their cars to a GB approval level. And therefore, cars for NI would have to be built to an EU approval level, which means that stock could not flow freely between NI and UK. And that's fundamental to how the industry actually operates or has operated previously.
And in addition to that, some of the vehicles on offer in the GB markets, because they run off a GB type approval, which may be lower in terms of standard than the EU threshold, those vehicles would not be able to be sold in Northern Ireland either. So we have potentially a restriction on the access to stock and potentially the range of stock. And this will most likely worsen as time moves on, because the regulation as to the requirement to have an EU type approved vehicle for Northern Ireland and a GB type approved vehicle for the other nations is staggered. So it's every time a vehicle changes from February of this year, that those new type approval rules apply. A vehicle that was in existence prior to February of this year can carry on with the old type approval. So over the next number of years, we're going to see increasing divergence, which is potentially going to be quite impactful to choice and availability of stock here.
Do manufacturers have any, from your engagement with manufacturers, do they have any specific targets for Northern Ireland per se?
Yes.
Or are they just, yes?
They will have a UK-wide target, and then they will allocate NI us with a proportion of that based on our market opportunity. But the fundamental flow of new vehicle stock between NI and mainland is pretty essential to how this industry actually operates, and that's going to come under pressure.
So what is the percentage proportion?
We're circa 2% of
Yeah.
the overall UK new vehicle market.
But we would probably source 50% of our vehicles from a pipeline or physical stock, which could be located at other dealers in the other 3 regions or in physical compounds in ports of entry. So effectively, we will not have access to those vehicles going forward because they will have been born with the wrong type approval. So effectively, we're going to have to order our own stock on day one, which doesn't allow us to move with the market or move with trends or customer demand or consumer offers that the manufacturers may have. So it's going to restrict our ability to trade somewhat.
Is that regardless of the mandate?
Yes.
Separate. Yes.
It's a consequence of Brexit, where going forward, the GB have their own type approval to replace the EU type approval, but Northern Ireland is considered still in the EU jurisdiction. So our vehicles have to have an EU type approval. So that has to be done specifically for vehicles which are registered in Northern Ireland. The GB type approval won't be able to be registered in Northern Ireland, and an EU type approval won't be able to be registered in GB.
Can I check in terms of the preparedness and readiness of dealerships here in Northern Ireland? So when did you become aware of it, and what work was undertaken by your members in Northern Ireland to support their readiness and to meet the requirements under the scheme?
It's really emerged over the last 6 months, probably, as in clarity over both the ZEV mandate position and also type approval. ZEV mandate started January this year on the mainland, and we've been watching it. We've been watching the numbers develop, getting feedback from manufacturers as to where their performance is and what the consequences might be. With type approval, it's been broadly the same. We were led to believe that cars would be dual approved, there'd be free movement of stock, but as manufacturers have sought to understand the detail, then they are now changing their position into probably building in the majority of their vehicles for the lower level GP approval. So it's a fluid picture and an emerging picture.
Okay. Members, does anyone want to come in or have any other questions? No? Okay. Look,
just one question. So how does that work then in terms of manufacturers and operating in Europe? Is it just because of the mandate?
No, this isn't to do with the mandate.
So are they coming out of the European market altogether?
This is more to do with the GB type approval, where
I appreciate that. What I'm trying to get a better understand is because you're using the GB regulation and the European regulation, and then when it comes to the north here, we need a certain regulation, and you're saying that it won't fit here when it travels across to here. That's my only point. So how does that? How then is the European one in manufacturing dealing with the European market and dealing with here? That's all I'm saying. If you understand my question.
I don't understand. Sorry, I don't understand.
Well, Brent, but then define exactly what's the major problem for moving cars over to here compared to what the EU regulations are.
Yeah. Typically, between a third and a half of the vehicles that we sell will be ordered by a customer to specification. So those cars are built for the customer. The remainder of the cars that would be ordered are ordered for stock.
Yeah.
Those cars have been built previously to the EU approval level. Those cars have landed at a port of entry in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst they are notionally cars that I have ordered, or we have ordered, after a period of, say, 30 days, those cars become freely available to any other retailer. So you get free movement of unsold available stock across the 4 nations.
Right, okay.
And that's fundamental to how the market actually works. With the approvals changing and NI being linked to the higher level of EU, we will lose that fluidity of stock movement. And essentially the cars that we order, we will essentially own. And that is it. Stock management is how this industry lives or dies in truth. It's so fundamental.
Oh, okay, okay. No, that's fair enough.
Does that
That's,
help?
yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
I just really want clarity before we finish this conversation. Surely that issue in terms of the dual type approval, that is still going to be an issue regardless if we agree this mandate or not. It is another separate issue.
Yeah.
So why is it fundamental then to a grace period or holding back the mandate?
It's not, Deborah. This is a completely separate issue.
Yeah.
Completely separate issue that needs to be addressed accordingly.
Yeah. So as a committee, I suppose our remit is to obviously agree or not agree to this mandate coming forward alongside the 4 jurisdictions. So, that issue is something that's going to have to be separated out from the mandate.
Yes.
Yeah?
That's correct.
Yeah.
My only comment would be that however the mandate lands and whatever the percentage for NI actually is, that task will become more difficult because of the consequences of type approval and the lack of free movement of stock.
Okay.
Okay. Members all content? Okay. Look, thank you very much for your time today in relation to giving evidence to the Infrastructure Committee. We appreciate you coming forward today on this issue, and no doubt we will be in communication throughout the rest of the mandate in terms of infrastructure here in Northern Ireland. So we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Complicated.
Okay, so we now nicely move on to item 8, which is the statutory instrument SI 2024 XXX, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024. You'll see at page 69 is the SL5 laying letter for the draft statutory instrument, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024. And at page 71, you'll see the draft statutory instrument, the Vehicle Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024. And at page 80, you'll see the draft explanatory, I can't even talk today, explanatory memorandum, the Vehicles Emissions Trading Schemes Amendment Order 2024. So I remind members that the committee took evidence from DFI officials on the 22nd of May on the extension of the vehicle emissions trading schemes to Northern Ireland. Following the evidence session, the committee agreed that it was content with the proposal to extend the scheme to Northern Ireland by way of statutory instrument. The SI was laid in the Assembly on the 9th of September, and the SI will be subject to draft affirmative resolution procedure and will not come into operation until affirmed by resolution of the Assembly. So informing members that SIs do not fall within the remit of the examiner for statutory rules. So I'm asking members if they are content with the statutory instruments, given obviously what we've heard today. But if you're not content and you want to request further information, we can do that. And we can hold a short informal meeting before next week's session. So I just want to check what members feel. Keith?
Yeah, I think I personally to reflect on them that session and have a bit of a think.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because there's a bit of...
I agree. I know that's what saying.
It's a bit heavy that, but there's a wee bit of processing of it on there.
A few questions. I mean, I got it all right but it's just there's a wee bit of doubt in what they're. Yeah, Chair, I would agree with that approach.
Okay, so are members content? Or sorry, Mark?
No, I'd be entirely supportive of that, and for us to get more information, maybe a further briefing explaining not just what this does, but what it means or what it will mean in the context of what we've been hearing today.
Yeah. So that'll have to be next Wednesday.
Yeah, Chair, I think just for the timescales that DFI need to be able to take this through the Assembly, it might be necessary to hold a short meeting then in advance of the effective questioning next week, so that the committee can reach its position on that SI.
Before the effective question?
Before the effective
absolutely,
question.
I'll be in before that, yeah, absolutely.
That would be subject, I mean, are members wanting officials to be available to ask questions? That might be the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah.
If officials are available, I'm looking.
Yeah. So do we do that, Chair, before Wednesday? That
we would do it. Yeah, start at 10 next week, and we'll do this. Hopefully, have a short session to get this finalised.
Before 10 on Wednesday or before Wednesday?
No, at 10 on Wednesday, unless you want to say about arranging a separate meeting on Monday or Tuesday.
Because if we do this before, it could maybe create more answers or more questions than answers.
Delaying it won't impact on anything. No,
it's come up with that.
I mean, this is obviously something that we're meant to agree today.
But I mean,
if we push it back, are we going to be? Is like
that's important.
I think there's coordination across the 4 jurisdictions.
Yeah,
that it has to be brought forward at the 4 jurisdictions at the same time. My understanding, I think, from DFI's briefing papers are that there could be a financial penalty if NI isn't included in this, which is
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I mean, how long can we delay making a decision on this? Is it fine to push back maybe a week and then just have an informal session, something like that, or are we talking maybe like a further month or what?
I don't think we would have a month on it. No, I think if the DFI hope to have it through, I think is it week commencing? I don't know.
We do it next week, Chair.
Yeah, but we
The
just
officials in.
Really just delaying the inevitable. If there's talk of a financial penalty if it's not doing it in time, there's going to be a bigger financial penalty for us not doing
and
it.
I think there's administrative cost as well to the department in relation to $500,000 or something. So that would be different.
I think we do need to hear from the department what they're proposing to do. And it's not solely DFI either, but in the context of the
conversation
raised, there's a cross-government. Across executive.
You were going to say DFI officials were hoping to have a decision by which date was it?
Week. I'm trying to get the weeks in my head. Actually, I need to have a look, but I think it's week commencing. Let me have a look at my calendar. Sorry, and I misspoke. Actually, it's not a financial penalty. It would be the administrative costs. I think are in the region of $500,000. It's possibly week commencing maybe the 14th of October. They're hoping to take it to, or week commencing the 21st at the very latest. I think.
If we push it back a week, then it won't have a dramatic impact in terms of financial implications or anything like that. So
no.
Okay.
If it's not in, I think by the start of January, that's where the administrative costs. It's not a financial penalty such as the administrative cost of the dual system. Yeah.
So are we content then to go with 10 a.m. next Wednesday?
Yeah.
In terms of briefing?
Yep.
Yeah.
2, 3.
Risk of maybe annoying Cahill, like could we do an earlier session again, just to make
sure
that we
get me a vehicle, get me an electric vehicle. I can travel faster. If you get me an EV, I'll be up here at 3, like to only take an hour and a half.
At 9:30.
We can, if you want, try and see if we could start at 9:30.
No.
Okay, 10 then. I'm taking
as long as there's time.
Questions through the last 2 hours, so half an hour meeting and then
Yeah.
maybe from 10:30 to 12:30 do the effective
Yeah,
question.
there's
Yeah.
the training thing this week
Yeah.
as well. That's grand. That's grand.
Okay, so I'm taking it that it's 10 a.m. next week. We will have a further briefing on this to get this ironed out. Okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so item 9 is the SL1, the Planning General Development Procedure Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2024. At page 88 is the SL1, the Planning General Development Procedure Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2024. And at page 104 is the Minister for Infrastructure response, providing further information the 18th of September. The rule is subject to negative resolution following briefings from officials in May 2024. The Department is proposing to amend the Planning General Development Procedure Order Northern Ireland 2015, SR 2015 number 72, to provide councils with the statutory power to prepare and publish planning application validation checklists. Checklists would set out the additional supporting information evidence required to accompany different types of planning application, etc., specific to its location, nature, scale and type of development proposed. The current minimum statutory requirements would remain unchanged. So I remind members that the committee initially considered the proposal at its meeting on the 11th of September and requested further information on a number of issues. The response is set out in the Minister's letter beginning at page 104 of the meeting pack. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content, okay. Item 10 is the subordinate legislation. SR is not subject to assembly procedure. Advise member that there are 5 statutory rules that are not subject to assembly proceedings and are not required to be laid. These are listed at pages 142 and 190 of the meeting pack and are SR 2024-164, the Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicles Amendment Number 2, Order Northern Ireland 2024, SR 2024-167, the Parking and Waiting Restrictions Newton Ards Order Northern Ireland 2024, the SR 2024-168, the Road Speed Limit Number 4 Order Northern Ireland, SR 2024-169, the Waiting Restrictions Ocker Order Northern Ireland 2024, and the SR 2024-170, Parking Places Disabled Persons Vehicles Amendment Number 3 Order Northern Ireland 2024. So remind members that the committee agreed it was content with the proposals for each of the statutory rules as meeting on the 11th of September. So are members content to note the statutory rules? Okay, item 11 is a review of the regional strategic planning policy on renewable and low carbon energy. Policy revision to the strategic planning policy statement written evidence. At page 138 you'll see the Department for Infrastructure review of strategic planning policy on renewable and low carbon energy policy revision to the SPPS written evidence 19th of September 2024. At page 143 you'll see Annex A, Public Consultation Responses Report. At page 176 is Annex B, Final Policy, Renewable and Low Carbon Energy. So advise members to note that as highlighted in the past correspondence, items 11.1, 11.2 and 11.3 carry a restricted marking and therefore should be managed in accordance with the information assurance policy and should not be circulated more widely. Members should be mindful if and what they discuss in open session. The Department has advised that the Minister would welcome any further comments from the committee by the 4th of October in advance of the Executive's consideration of the revised policy. Do any members have anything that they want to raise on it? There was a couple of things just that I had noticed in relation to some of the Council's responses at pages 153 and 154 of the pack. And councils had said about they had strong opinions on implementation, and the required further clarification. So I just wanted to check, given that councils are going to be the planning bodies, just to check if those clarification have been given to those councils, and then just to check what their sources of concern were, and or if there was any engagement since then with those councils. Are members content with that? Okay. So are members content to note their revised final policy? Just for now until we get yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 12 is the active travel delivery plan, public consultation, notification, written evidence. At page 183 is the Department for Infrastructure notification of public consultation on the active travel delivery plan, 19th of September 2024. Advise members that the department will be commencing with a public consultation on the active travel delivery plan on the 15th of November, which will run for 15 weeks and is aimed to seek on the methodology used for route prioritisation, the chosen routes and any equality impacts. So I'm just letting you all know that the department has extended an invitation to the committee to attend the launch event on the 13th of November from 9:30 until 3:30 at Craigavon Civic and Conference Centre. Before you check your diaries, that does coincide with our committee, but would have a impact obviously on our committee's usual meeting time. Therefore, I'm suggesting that the committee considers this when there's a formal invitation to the committee and we are aware of the full agenda for the event. Are members content with that before we agree? Yeah. Okay, item 13 is correspondence. At page 189 is a correspondence memo. At page 191 is item 13.2, correspondence from the Committee for Justice, enclosing correspondence from an individual relating to taxi licensing issues. Remind members that the committee has previously considered correspondence from this individual and agreed at its meeting on the 20th of February to respond to the individual to explain the committee's role and function, which was quite a comprehensive response. A copy of this letter is at page 195 of members' pack. So I'm just seeking agreement from members that they are content to note this and any further items of correspondence originating from this individual on this issue. Content? Okay. Page 234 is item 13.4. It's correspondence from the Public Accounts Committee. Further information to the Memorandum of Reply Planning in Northern Ireland. Advise members that in its response to the Public Accounts Committee, DFI has advised that the Minister has asked the Interim Regional Planning Commission to draw up a work programme to March 2025 to provide solution-focused advice to support the Planning Improvement Programme. So, I'm seeking agreement just that we request that DFI provides a copy of the work programme to the committee, and I felt that it would be pertinent to maybe arrange a subsequent oral evidence session with the Interim Regional Planning Commission. Or have you any other comments that you want to raise? No?
Nope.
Okay, so you're content with that approach then on that item? Yeah. Okay, so I'm asking members if they have any comment or wish to raise any issue on any other items of correspondence. No? Okay. So I'm seeking agreement that members are content to note the correspondence and the remaining suggested actions as contained in the correspondence memo in the meeting pack. Okay. Item 14 is the Forward Work Programme. At page 312, you see the draft Forward Work Programme. Advise members that the draft Forward Work Programme has been updated to reflect decisions following the meeting last week, and I'm seeking to proceed with evidence sessions as set out in the draft Forward Work Programme and reflect any decisions today. Obviously, the key one being that briefing before our training session next week. Members content? Okay, so item 15 is any other business. So I'm asking members if they have any other items of business that they wish to raise.
Just on,
yeah.
just for conversation only for 1 minute. The reason why I asked the issue of the local development plans, because initially local development, and I appreciate there's an overview in the pack, but that wasn't my question. Even though I did ask for an update, my main point is that NIW is struggling to meet all these infrastructure projects because of a number of reasons. Each council will now come forward with a number of projected units. Whoever who's took time out to respond to the LDPs, there's forecast and projected number of housing units per each council area over the next whatever period it is, for 10 years or whatever, and that will play a role in terms of our overall programme, in terms of what NIW can meet and everything else. And it's just to remain as we go forward with all the conversations, because once those area plans come out and they say that, say Fermanagh, whatever our ABC says we have 15,000 projected units over the next 5 years, we need to know what's going on in terms of NIW's programme to facilitate those. You know, that's the only reason brought up in that context. It's something we as a committee will have to keep a wee eye on. You know what I mean? I mean, we're not saying it's an issue. It's up to each area plan. They've done it themselves, so we're not questioning that. We will just will meet challenges in the future about the number of housing units that each area has ambition to make. That's all I'm saying. It's only fair.
You say the same then about stuff coming from other departments. If Department for Communities is coming forward with a housing strategy that says
no, absolutely. I
deliver
know
100,000 homes in 15 years.
But it's not even that. It's just on this case here as part of the committee work, because it will come up.
Well, we have, as last week, I think we agreed that we would meet with the Construction Employers Federation and NI Water, and that was in relation to the capacity issues with NI Water. So you're right, in a sense, it is something we're going to be continually having briefings in relation to this issue, and I suppose all of us are very well aware of what the problems are, but it will be something we will have to keep on the agenda, and whenever briefings come up, we can point to those questions within that.
Because their own councils are going to be asking, because they're going to agree the plans. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. But it's part of the work of the committee. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other items of any other business? No? Okay. So,
Chair,
sorry.
I was just looking through the forward work programme and about visits. It'd be interesting to get an understanding of, I've asked personally to visit the water treatment of Lough Neagh, considering it's supplying 40% of Northern Ireland. I don't know why it's an option for the committee to visit. And that could be water treatment, whether it be clean water or wastewater, to get a visual understanding.
Yeah.
And that could be in conjunction with a committee meeting, obviously, you know, not just a...
Yeah.
And we'll head to the west, obviously, you know, closer to civilization.
We got nothing in there.
Yeah, we could keep it on the radar, because
it'll be tomorrow, obviously, but you know.
Or next week. No, just give us a few days to plan it.
We can take a look into it and see.
So it is a big issue, like.
Yeah. Okay. Members content?
Yep.
Okay, so date, time and location of the next meeting. So obviously as part of next week's meeting we have effective question session, which will be scheduled with John Sturrock KC. So I am encouraging everybody to come along to that, and obviously it's quite important considering now we also have that extra briefing. And we need members here to be able to sorry, I haven't finished just yet. We do need members here to make sure that we are quorate to go forward and make some decisions around the mandate as well. So it is imperative that you are there. Okay, so we'll see you at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 9th of October. Oh, sorry, 2nd of October.
No, sorry, Chair, you'll see us in the night there.
I'm time travelling here. 10 a.m. on the 2nd of October in room 29 Parliament Building. Thank you, everybody. And now adjourn the meeting.
Committee Room 29. Sound.